Chapter 8. It was dark outside the police station, so Dink's father stopped a cab, and they all got in. Dink sat in the back between Josh and Ruth Rose. His father sat next to the driver. "Do you think they did it?" Josh whispered to Dink and Ruth Rose. "But Lily was tied up, and with that sash thing," Ruth Rose said, "and she had a bag over her head. Maybe the cops think Holden tied her to make it look like someone else did it," Josh said. Dink remembered the few minutes that Holden had disappeared during the parade. He'd told the kids that he'd gone to use one of the portable bathrooms. Had he been lying? Dink also remembered the look on Holden's face when they found Lily tied up. That look was no lie. "I believe Holden," Dink said. "Did you see his face when we found Lily hidden under that box? He was really shocked, guys." The cab driver pulled up in front of the Bayside Hotel. Dink's father paid him, and they all went inside. The concierge, Mr. Alderson, smiled from behind his desk. "Good evening, folks," he said. "How was your day, kids?" "Fine, thank you," they all murmured. No one wanted to mention what happened at the parade. The elevator took them to the third floor. The Bayside was the kind of hotel that offered its guests small apartments as well as single rooms. Dink's father had rented an apartment with 3 bedrooms, a living room, and a tiny kitchen. Josh opened the refrigerator. "There's nothing to eat," he announced. "What would you like, Josh?" Mr. Duncan asked. He winked at Dink and Ruth Rose behind Josh's back. "A juicy steak with mashed potatoes, fried chicken, spaghetti and meatballs?" "Yes," Josh said, grinning at the others. He threw himself on the sofa and picked up his sketchbook. "I heard some of what you kids said in the cab," Dink's father said. "Do you really think Holden and his girlfriend stole the crown?" "It would have been pretty easy," Josh said. "He and Lily could have cooked it all up together. There were so many people and all those fireworks going off. Holden could have climbed into the float with Lily, and they could have faked the robbery." "But what if Lily hadn't been chosen as Miss Chinatown?" Ruth Rose asked. "What if the other girl was chosen?" "Then they could have robbed the crown off her head instead," Josh said. "Only it was Lily, so their plan was perfect." "I don't know," Dink's father said. "Holden seems like a decent kid." "I agree with you, Dad," Dink said. "Plus, he was so surprised that she was under that box. How could he fake that?" "Don't forget he's studying acting in college," Ruth Rose reminded them. "Maybe he was only pretending to be surprised." "But what about that person I saw running away from the dragon?" Dink asked, "and heading right for the swan float?" No one had an answer. The 4 sat and thought. Josh turned pages in his sketchbook and picked up his pencil. "Dad, can we help Holden and Lily?" Dink asked his father after a moment. "I mean, is there anything we can do?" Dink's father stood up. "I don't know, son, but I'll call the police station. Maybe I can help Holden and Lily get a lawyer. After all, I hired Holden to take you kids to the parade." Dink's father walked to his bedroom. Ruth Rose scooted over next to Josh. "What are you drawing?" she asked. "Just parade stuff," Josh said. "Can I look?" Ruth Rose asked. "Sure, Nosy Rosie," Josh teased. He tilted the sketchbook so she could see. "Josh, these are so good," Ruth Rose said. "Look, Dink." Dink stood behind the sofa and looked over Ruth Rose's shoulder. Josh had made several small drawings on one of the pages. One was a man's face that Dink thought was supposed to be Dr. Worthington. Josh had also made sketches of 2 sea lions, the dragon's head, and Holden's green machine. Dink smiled at the 3 small figures sitting in the passenger's seat. It was Josh, Ruth Rose, and himself. At the bottom of the page, Josh was drawing what looked like some kind of flying animal. It was a sort of furry box with wings. "What's that?" Dink asked. "It's supposed to be the swan float," Josh said, "but it's not finished." Ruth Rose giggled. "With curly hair?" she asked. "Duh, that's not hair," Josh said. "Those are the flowers on the float." He made a few marks with his pencil. "Here are the swan's wings, and here's Miss Chinatown throwing candy, and here's..." "Wait a minute!" Dink cried. He jumped off the back of the sofa, landing next to Josh. He grabbed the sketchbook and pointed to the drawing. "This looks like the same picture that guy at the aquarium was drawing on his laptop." Dink plucked Josh's pencil from his friend's fingers. He made a few lines on the side of Josh's rectangle. See? That guy's drawing had these lines too. I think they were meant to be that little ladder on the side of the float. Why would some stranger be drawing the swan float? Ruth Rose asked. Just then, Dink's father came into the room. I have some bad news, he said. The police searched Holden's apartment and his green machine bike. They found the crown. It was hidden inside a compartment under the passenger seat on Holden's bike. The three kids sat with their mouths open. No one said a word. Traffic hummed outside. The wall clicked, clock ticked. Dink felt his heart racing. Did they find the ruby? Dink asked. His father shook his head. The ruby had been removed from the crown, he said. Both Lily and Holden have been arrested and charged with the theft.